Are you ready to play a game with me? We're gonna play, Do I Have to Disclose? You know, strange things happen in this world, and sometimes strange things happen inside homes. And then people often want to know, does a seller have to disclose those things that we don't know about that take place or that go wrong in a home? So stick around, let's test your disclosure knowledge. I am your hostess, Jill Thomas with Berkshire Hathaway, HomeServices, Florida Realty. After years of going into many homes, after a while, they all look pretty normal and average, but it's the things that you can't see that make you go, So what are those things that the seller really does have to disclose? Well, that's determined by the laws in the state of Florida. Each state has their own set of laws of what the seller really truly does have to disclose. So before we get started with our game, do I have to disclose? We're going to review the state of Florida rules for sellers. Okay, so according to Florida law, according to the Supreme Court in Johnson versus Davis and Florida Statute Section 475, both the seller and the licensee, me, the real estate agent, if we are aware of anything that would materially affect the value of the home and it's not readily observable, we can't, a potential buyer can't quickly see it with their own eyes, then it has to be disclosed. So for instance, a stain on the carpet, we don't have to disclose, but a roof leak would have to be disclosed. Now keep in mind, sellers, that even if an as-is contract is used, even if you know for a fact the buyer's having an inspection, or even if there's no realtors involved and you're doing for sale by owner, you are still required by law to disclose these things. So that's the basis. Now as we move on to our quiz here, our little test, we'll see how well you do with this understanding. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, let's start our game. Do I have to disclose? And there's gonna be 10 questions. Keep score, let's see how you do. Now the first question is probably the one I get asked about the most, and it's just more out of curiosity. So yes or no, does a seller have to disclose if they're aware of a death, murder, or suicide that took place in the property? The answer is no, they do not have to disclose that according to Florida law. My dog, Carly, wanted some love. Okay, number 2. If a resident has been infected with HIV or AIDS, is it required for the seller to disclose that to potential buyers? And the answer is no. They don't have to disclose that at all. Number 3, unpermitted work. So work that has been completed without any permits. Does that have to be disclosed? The answer is yes, it definitely does. But remember what the law says. It's what the seller is aware of. So if a previous owner had done work without any permits and you weren't aware of it, then you're not on the hook to communicate that to the buyer because you don't know. But if you did the work and it should have been permitted and it wasn't, then you do need to disclose that to the buyer. Now what will happen is, suppose you don't, and then down the road, the county or the city, the local ordinance comes after that new owner and says, hey, this work was done without any permits, then that new owner is gonna come back to you and look to you to get that taken care of. So just be aware of that. So it is required for you to disclose unpermitted work. Okay, here's a funny one. What about number 4, odd smells or noises? Does a seller have to disclose that to a buyer? Okay, well this one's tricky. It's both yes and no because it depends. It really depends. If the noise is from like road noise or from the interstate, then that's readily observable, and then that obviously wouldn't have to be disclosed. Or if the property was near a factory or someplace like that. But if for some reason there were random smells or noises or issues, then please be prepared to disclose that to a buyer. Okay, number 5, this is a good one. Does a seller have to disclose if a crime was committed in the property? Yes or no? The answer is no, they do not have to according to Florida law. Okay, number 6, historic designation. Does a seller have to disclose to a buyer if a property has a historic designation? The answer is yes, absolutely. And it doesn't matter if the designation is a national one or a local one. And it's important to communicate that, because with that designation, often there's going to be limitations on what can be done to the property aesthetically and other ways too. So they need to be aware of that. Now, if a property is a candidate for a historic designation and they currently don't have one, it would be a nice thing for a seller to tell a potential buyer about that, because that could be a nice selling point, but it's not required. Okay, number 7. Now, suppose there was issues with either termites, mold, or even a leak, whether it was a roof leak or just a leak under the kitchen sink. And it was completely repaired, fixed by a licensed person, and any damage was taken care of, and it's better than ever. Does that have to be disclosed to a buyer? Yes, 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 it does, for sure. Doesn't matter if it's good as new, perfect, beautiful. Please, please, you do need to disclose that to a buyer. Okay, number 8. This is one that I also get asked about often, just more out of curiosity. But does a seller have to disclose if a house is haunted or if there has been known paranormal activity? Yes or no? The answer is no. A seller does not have to disclose hauntings or possible paranormal activity. They do not have to do that at all. Number 9, does a seller have to disclose if there is a gopher tortoise on the property? The answer is yes, absolutely. Any endangered species, including a gopher tortoise, if they're on the property or if they have a nest, that does have to be disclosed to a buyer, because that could impact some of the things they can do on or with the property. And then also you do need to disclose if there's mangroves on the property, because there's limitations on things that people can do with them. They can't be pulled out. In fact, you need a permit just to trim them back a bit. So that's really important that you disclose that to buyers. And then number 10, potential coastal erosion. Does a seller have to disclose that? You bet, they sure do. So because you want a buyer to be aware of what might be happening to their property if it's gonna start to erode. So that's an important thing to tell them. So how did you do with our game? Post your score in the comments section below. And here are a few other things that are really important, sellers, for you to disclose to buyers. Things that have happened in the past or currently happening right now, like radon gas, sinkholes. If the property's in the flood zone, you definitely need to disclose that. If membership to a homeowners association or a condo association, and then also if you have any legal issues percolating out there or possibly happening, and not just against you or your property, but also against the HOA or the condo association. That's really, really important for you to let a buyer know about. Now, earlier I did mention that if a crime took place in a property, that doesn't have to be disclosed. But if there were something that was involved with the crime that would impact the value of the property, you do need to disclose that. So let's say chemicals seeped into the soil, or there was a fire or an explosion because of that crime or illegal activity, then be sure that you still disclose that. Okay, so as I keep saying, if a seller is aware of something, please disclose that. We do have these few exceptions, but those are definitely exceptions, not the rule. And if we're not sure about something, we can just contact an attorney and get their take on it, and then also how to handle any potential questions if it's a really unique situation. Now, often sellers seem a little leery about filling out a seller's disclosure. Maybe they're afraid that they're going to turn off buyers. But honestly, there's something wrong with every home. No house is perfect. And so if a seller's disclosure is really squeaky clean, it doesn't give me a lot of confidence that the seller is sharing things with us that they maybe should. Could derail a transaction, because then once that buyer has an inspection and we see all these things that maybe had taken place at the house and the seller didn't disclose it, it really makes it for a bumpy ride through the rest of the process. Now, don't forget to post your score in the comments and let me know what things you were really surprised about that a seller does or maybe does not have to disclose. I thought this was a really fun one. Thanks so much for joining me, your hostess with the mostest, Jill Thomas with Berkshire Hathaway, Home Services, Florida Realty, and her baby girl, Carly. Yeah, my baby. Thanks so much for watching.